Good morning, class. In this video, I'm going to be reading you the Greek myth of Daedalus. Daedalus was the greatest inventor of his day. Not only as an architect was he great, but as a sculptor he had the creative power to not only carve people and animals that looked alive, but to cause them to move and to be all appearances, endowed with life. The artificers who followed owed to him the invention of the axe, the wedge, and the carpenter's level, and his restless mind was ever busy with new inventions. To his nephew, Perdix, he taught all that he himself knew of the mechanical arts. Soon it seemed that the nephew might actually equal Daedalus in his inventive power. As he walked by the seashore, the lad picked up the spine of a fish, and, having pondered its possibilities, he took it home, imitated it in iron, and so invented the saw. The excited Perdix brought his fine invention to his uncle's workshop. Instead of feeling joy in celebrating the invention, Daedalus realized that his young nephew was gifted with inspiration that might grow to excel his own. This was too much for the elder man's jealous spirit. A few days later, uncle and nephew stood together on the top of the Acropolis, and Daedalus, murderous thoughts bubbling up from the jealousy in his heart, pushed his nephew from behind, causing the boy to tumble from the precipice. Down, down he fell, knowing well that he was going to meet a cruel death. But Pallas Athena, protectress of the clever craftsman, came to his rescue. By her will, Perdix was turned into the bird that still bears his name, and Daedalus beheld Perdix, the partridge, rapidly winging his way to the far-off fields. Since then, no partridge has ever built or roosted in a high place, but has nestled in the hedge roots and amongst the standing corn, and as we mark it, we can see that its flight is always low. For his crime, Daedalus was banished from Athens. In the court of Minos, king of Crete, he found refuge, offering the saw as a wondrous new tool to benefit the people of Crete. Daedalus immediately won favor of King Minos and his royal family. Daedalus soon became a favorite of the royal daughters, Ariadne and Phaedra, who were mesmerized by the dolls Daedalus created for them, and because the wooden figures were built with hidden springs that allowed them to dance and wave and blink. Queen Pasiphae was also charmed by Daedalus's inventions, including a perfume container that played music when it was uncapped, and a bejeweled mirror that allowed her to see the back of her head. She had never seen such clever trinkets, and often lingered in Daedalus's workshop, hoping to learn more about the interesting inventor. Over time, Daedalus and Queen Pasiphae became friends, gossiping and chatting away the afternoons. Pasiphae grew more and more curious about the events that led Daedalus to leave Athens, but he would always sidestep her questions, saying only that he had lost Athena's favor. "Oh, all I ever hear from Minos is gods and goddesses. Be reverent of the gods and goddesses," Pasiphae complained one afternoon. "I tell you, I am sick of hearing such talk. Intelligent people like us know that we are the ones who create our successes, right? I'm so tired of giving the credit and blame to the gods." Now, Daedalus said. "Please don't say such things, Pasiphae. The gods will hear you and be angered." "I'm baffled to hear such an intelligent man say such things," she said. "A skilled craftsman like you is as talented as Hephaestus, are you not? And I am as beautiful as the mythical Aphrodite. Don't you agree?" Daedalus stood awkwardly, not wanting to offend the gods or his queen. Pasiphae continued, taking Daedalus's silence as agreement. "And love is the biggest lie of all. Aphrodite's power falls on us all, they say. Yet here I am, a beautiful woman, tied to a pompous king who loves only the sound of his own voice. This love that people speak of is a falsehood. I've never felt it, and I never will." Daedalus consoled the queen, and deftly changed the subject, distracting her from her misery with his newest invention. A gossamer threaded parasol, this is like an umbrella, that opened on its own whenever it was touched by sunlight, and closed on its own when placed in shadows. The conversation ended, but the damage had already been done. High upon Olympus, Aphrodite had heard everything, and now Queen Pasiphae would be punished. She placed a spell over Pasiphae, making her fall madly in love with a prized white bull that King Minos kept on the royal grounds. Pasiphae was drawn to the bull by inexplicable attraction, and in time gave birth to a son who was half bull, half man. Weird, right? Upon learning of the monstrous child, citizens of Crete began calling the child by the name Minotaur, meaning Minos, Taurus, or bull. The king was humiliated by his wife's infidelity and sought Daedalus's help in crafting a cruel punishment. Knowing that people will quickly forget about things they cannot see, he instructed Daedalus to build an intricate labyrinth which had only one opening and no end. A labyrinth is like a really big maze, but ever returned on itself in hopeless intricacy. Minos then locked his wife and her child away in the complex maze. When the king learned that Daedalus had known of Pasiphae's affection for the bull and did nothing to stop it, he punished the inventor as well, locking him away in a prison tower. To double the punishment, Minos also imprisoned Daedalus' son Icarus. But prison bars and locks did not exist that were strong enough to baffle this master craftsman. And from the tower in which they were shut, Daedalus and his son were not long in plotting their escape. Leaving the tower would be a mild challenge, but leaving the island itself was far more problematic. There were many places in that wild island where it would be easy for father and son to hide, but the subjects of Minos were mostly mariners, and Daedalus knew well that all along the shore they kept watch, lest he should make a boat, hoist on it one of the sails of which he was part inventor, and speed away to safety like a sea bird driven before the gale. Then did there come to Daedalus, the pioneer of inventions, the great idea that his skill he might make a way for himself and his son through an element older than water. And he laughed aloud in his hiding place amongst the cypresses on the hillside, at the thought of how he would baffle the simple sailors who watched each creek and beach down on the shore. Mockingly, too, did he think of King Minos, who had dared to pit the power against the wits and skill of Daedalus, the mightiest of the craftsmen. Many a Cretan bird was sacrificed before Daedalus' task was accomplished. After bribing 2 guards, Daedalus was allowed to work in a shady forest near the tower, where he fashioned light wooden frames and decked them with feathers, until at a length they looked like pinions of a great eagle or a swan that flaps its majestic way from the lake to the river. Each feather was adhered with wax, and the mechanism of the wings was so perfect, a reproduction of an actual bird's wings, that on the first day he fastened them to his back and spread them out. Daedalus found that he could fly just as the birds flew. He made 2 pairs. The second pair was made for Icarus, and, circling round him like a mother bird that teaches her nestlings how to fly, Daedalus, his heart big with pride of the invention, showed Icarus how he might best soar upwards to the sun or dive down to the blue sea far below. Now he might conquer the winds and the air currents of the sky and make them his servants. That was a joyous day for father and son, for the father had never before drunk deeper of the intoxicating wine of the gods, success, and for the lad it was all pure joy. Never before had he known freedom and power so utterly glorious. As a child he had watched the birds fly far away over the blue hills to where the sun was setting, and had longed for wings that he might follow them in their flight. At times, in his dreams, he had known the power, and in his dreaming he had risen from the cumbering earth and soared high above the trees and fields on strong wings, and bore them away to the fair land of heart's desire, to the islands of the blessed. But upon awakening, the dream silently slipped out before the coming of the light of the day, and the boy sprang from his bed and eagerly spread his arms, only to realize he could no longer fly. Disappointment and unsatisfied longing often came with those waking hours. Now all that had come to an end, and Daedalus was glad and proud as well to watch his son's joy and his fearless daring. One word of counsel only did he agree. "Beware, dear son of my heart," he said, "lest in thy new-found power thou seekest to soar even to the gates of Olympus. For as surely as the scorching rays from the burnished wheels of the chariot of Apollo smite thy wings, the wax that binds thy feathers will melt. Then will come upon thee and on me woe unutterable." So basically what Daedalus is saying to Icarus here is don't fly too high towards the sun, because the wax will melt and you will fall. In his dreams that night Icarus flew, and when he woke, fearing to find only the haunting remembrance of a dream, he found his father ready to bind their willing shoulders with the greatest pinions that he had made. Gentle dawn with fingerprints of rose was slowly making her way up from the east when Daedalus and Icarus began their flight. Slowly they went at first, And the goatherds who tended their flocks on the slopes of Mount Ida looked up in fear when they saw the dark shadows of monster-sized birds making their way out to sea. From the riverbeds the waterfowl arose from the reeds, and with a great outcry flew with all their swiftness to escape them. And down by the seashore the mariners' hearts sank within them, as they watched, believing that a sight so strange must be a portent of disaster. Homewards the mariners went in haste to offer sacrifices on the altars of Poseidon, ruler of the deep. So the people who lived on Crete were convinced that seeing these huge birds was like an omen, like a sign that something bad was going to happen, so they figured they'd need to go make a sacrifice to the gods. As the mighty wings of Icarus cleft the cold air, the boy's slim body grew chilled, and as he longed for the sun's warming rays to turn the waters of the Aegean Sea from green-gray into sapphire and emerald and burning gold, towards Sicily he and his father bent their course, and they saw the beautiful island lying far off like a gem in the sea, which Apollo had bathed in a gleaming light. With a cry of joy Icarus marked the sun's rays as they painted the chill water, and Apollo looked down at the great white-winged bird, a snowy swan with the face and form of a beautiful boy, who sped exulting onwards, while a clumsier thing with wings of a darker hue followed a ways behind in the same line of flight. As the god looked, the warmth that radiated from his chariot touched the icy limbs of Icarus, as with the caressing touch of a gentle, life-giving hands. Not long before his flight had lagged a little, but now it seemed as if new life was his, like a bird that wheels and soars and dives, as if for lightness of heart. So did Icarus, until each feather of his plumage had a sheen of silver and gold. Down, down, he darted, so near the water that the white-tipped waves almost caught at his wings as he skimmed over them. Then up, up, up he soared, even higher, higher still, and when he saw the radiant sun-god smiling down on him, the warning of Daedalus was forgotten. As he had excelled other lads in foot races, now did Icarus wish to excel the birds themselves. Daedalus was left far behind, and still upwards he mounted. So strong he felt, so fearless was he, that to him it seemed that he could storm Olympus itself. In terror his father called to Icarus in an anguished warning, but his voice was drowned out by the whistling rush of the air current. Powerless, he could do nothing but watch horror befall his son. The strong wings began to lose their power. Like a wounded bird Icarus fluttered, lunging sideways from the straight, clean line of his flight, recovering himself, then fluttering again. Then, like the bird into whose soft breast the sure hand of a mighty archer had driven an arrow, downwards he fell, turning over and yet turning again, downwards, ever downwards, until he fell with a plunge into the sea that was still radiant in a shining emerald and translucent blue. Apollo's golden chariot drove on. His rays had slain one who was greatly daring, and now they illuminated the little feathers that had fallen from the broken wings and floated on the water like the petals of the torn flower. The light shone on the dead, still-faced Icarus, and the sun rays spangled the wet plumage that still buoyed his corpse upon the waves. Stricken at heart, Daedalus had no time to lament his son's untimely end, for even now the black-prowed ships of Minos might be in pursuit. Onward he flew to safety, and in Sicily built a temple to Apollo, and there hung up his wings as a propitiatory offering to the god who had slain his son. And when grey night came down on the part of the sea where Icarus met his demise, still there floated the body of the boy whose dreams had come true. For only a little while he had known the exquisite realization of his dreams. For only a few moments he tasted the sweetness of the perfect pleasure, and then, by an over-daring flight, had lost it all forever. The sorrowing Nereids sang a dirge over him as he was swayed gently hither and thither by the tide. And when the silver stars came out from the dark firmament of the heaven, and were reflected in the blackness of the sea at night, it was as though a velvet pall, silver-decked in his honor, was spread through the slim white body with its outstretched snowy wings. So much had he and his father dared, yet so little was accomplished. And that concludes the reading of the myth Daedalus.